Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast. It's Ben Lister here. How are you doing today? And welcome along to episode 13 of the BL and Friends podcast. Right, let's crack on. As you know, each week I have my friends to talk about their hobbies, their careers, and their jobs. So let's crack on with this week's guest, and crack on we shall. My guest today, it's broadcaster from all different radio stations. It's the one, the only, Tony Sweeney. Hi, Tony. Welcome along.
Hi, Ben. Good to speak with you today. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Yeah.
Good.
You haven't had the David Lloyd interview yet, but you've got the Ben Lister interview to go through first.
You know, you're the very first person that's done this sort of thing with me. And then I know you got in touch with me a couple of weeks ago, and I was a bit reluctant at first. I was thinking, well, why do you want to interview me? I was thinking because I've not had a broadcast career as such, because I've always done radio as a hobby, which, you know, I've quite enjoyed, been involved with it over a long time. And then I looked at the list of the people that you'd interviewed, and I thought, you know, I've worked with about 60 or 70% of these people. So if it's good enough for them to give you a bit of time, then I'll give it a bash as well.
Brilliant. Shall we begin?
Yes, why not?
This is a cross between Piers Morgan's life stories and This Is Your Life.
Oh, I'm not a massive fan of Piers Morgan, so I'll forget that first bit.
He's joining this radio station I like, Talk Radio, very soon. So I'm
Right,
not happy
okay, good luck to him. That's all I'll say.
Because I interviewed someone who he knows, Ian Collins, recently, if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we get on?
Yeah, why not? Let's do it.
Question one, where did you start your broadcast career?
Well, the very first time I went into a radio station was way back in the 80s. It was at Radio Humberside, of all places, when it was in the old studios in Chapel Street. But above what was the post office then, I think it's a cafe now. And our school had done a lot of fundraising for children in need. So they invited a couple of people along to help out on the Children in Need night. So I was a bit of a runner between the different, stuff that we're doing there. I had to go to McDonald's to get the food, which was free. So that was brilliant as a teenager, you can imagine. But yeah, being serious, my first ever time I was on the radio was a few years after that, early 1990s. I know you interviewed Steve Jordan a while back, and he mentioned Radio Cracker, which was a Christian charity radio station that did a few broadcasts for a month around Christmas time. So I got involved with that. I think literally I'd just seen an advert in the paper for it. So I went to the meetings and I got involved, and they gave me an overnight show, which was brilliant. Loved that. And I met a couple of guys there called Tom Robinson and Dave Hutchins. Dave sadly passed away last year, no longer with us, but they'd been involved with hospital radio in Hull, Kingstown radio for, a good 15 years, even by that point. Tom still involved with the station. And they invited me down there, and I took it from there. The first guy who invited me on his show was somebody called Darren Dolby, who went on to work for Viking and Magic for a long time. And I've been at Kingstown since. We're actually off air at the moment. Our accommodation was knocked down during COVID at the Hull Royal Infirmary, because they had major expansion plans, and with everything that's going on, that we're still in talks in terms of getting alternative accommodation with the trust. So, and I'm also taking a bit of a break from radio as well. So in that respect, it's turned out quite well for me. But yeah, Kingstown Radio, my first broadcast outlet, as it were, that was 1992, 93, I think. And then 3 or 4 years later, I got a phone call from Steve Jordan, inviting me along to Viking to help out on a sports show called Who Ate All the Pies, and the football show on a Saturday afternoon. It was also called Talking Balls, so I can't remember which came first, whether it was Talking Balls or Who Ate All the Pies. Steve Jordan and John Bradley hosting it. I was like the producer, had to get all the clips of all the goals going in for the local matches and the national matches as well, stuff like that. So I quite enjoyed that, and that led to other shows on the station. Friday Night Kiss, I ended up being the tech op for. The live nights at the Gallery in York, Pepsi Chart, Hit 40 UK. Even did some stuff on Magic 1161 as well. A guy called Scotty McClue, who did a late night phone in, which was, let's say, an acquired taste. I even tech up that for a little while. I know one of your colleagues, Pete Tyler, he was the main guy that ran that one, but when Pete wasn't available, they dragged me in for it as well.
Dinky Do, is it, Scotty McLean?
Dinky Do, yeah. It wasn't my thing, so when I was in there, I used to keep the volume down really low, but high enough so I could hear where I had to put the adverts in and jingles and things. So it was loud enough so I didn't fall asleep.
Where did he do the show from?
Good question. It might have been Hallam at that point in Sheffield, because I think obviously Viking, Hallam and Radio Air were linked. He did, I don't know if he's still on air at the moment somewhere, but he moved about a bit, hasn't he, I think, with his career. I have a feeling it was the Hallam Studios in Sheffield.
Yeah, he's doing a few things, and I'm trying to get him on a podcast sometime.
Okay.
On doing one of these, Scotty McLean, I am trying.
Yeah, but just going back to Kingstown for a second, I've just wrote a few names down of people that I work with that went on to work primarily in this area, and I think it's got quite a good record. I mentioned Darren Dolby, Darren Leatham, good friend of yours. He started out at Kingstown. I think he'd left by the time I joined, but he did come back when we did some month-long broadcasts in the city to publicise our services, basically. Mark Summers started out at Kingstown when he was very young. John Fox, I remember those two guys doing their demos while I was there in the studio with them, and they went on to good things in radio. So that was great. James Hogarth, we sort of can't keep the BBC out of it, can we? We mentioned a lot of commercial stuff, but James Hogarth, one of his first jobs on hospital radio was reading the chemist rota out on a Sunday, I think it was, with a guy called Richard Usher. He was a very good guy as well, involved in radio for a few years. So yeah, it's got a proud record of bringing people on, and plenty more before that, before my time as well. They're putting names that, I've forgotten about, to be honest with you.
Brilliant. Question 2, who were your inspirations in broadcasting when you were starting out?
Right, well, I'm getting on a bit now. I'm in my 1950s. I'm in my 50s. I wasn't born in the 50s, I hasten to add, but I remember as a young kid listening to Radio Luxembourg on medium wave, 208 meters in the evening. It was only on from about 7 o'clock till maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, and you can't imagine it now in the world we're in now. But the actual reception was dreadful. It would fade in and out, and you'd have to turn your radio around just to get better reception, but you put up with it because it was the only thing that was broadcasting pop music in the evening. This was before Viking had started, so I used to listen to people on there like Rob Jones, Mike Hollis, Bob Stewart. Had a great deep American voice, even though he was from Liverpool, ironically. And then 1984 was a big year for me in radio. Viking started in the April. Dave Fewster is still very much involved in radio locally. He was the first breakfast show presenter. And I remember setting my alarm to listen to the very first song on Viking at 7 o'clock, I think it was, in the morning. And then there was another station came along called Laser 558 that was a pirate radio station in the North Sea, but you could pick it up really well in Hull. An all-American lineup pretty much. And there was very little speech in between the music. So you got whole streams of music, which was brilliant. Names like Jessie Brandon, she was a great DJ on there. Charlie Wolf, another one. So yeah, that's where my love of music started, really. Diana Luke, I need to mention as well, sorry. We talked about her before we started the official podcast. She joined Viking about 1985-86, and I've kind of followed her career since. And she's had a bit of a renaissance over the years after a bit of a break with her other careers. She had a great show on the BBC not long back in Yorkshire on a Saturday night, which was a 60s show, but that had a really good interactive feedback community radio, really, should I say. Certainly on Facebook, there was maybe 20 or 30 people every show would be chatting on there, and then the chat with Dinah, and she put the stuff on the air as well. So it felt like a real family, and she's always come across to me as a really warm person. So I'd count her as a bit of an idol as well. So I met her a couple of times. It was a little bit starstruck even, but yeah.
Yeah, I also like, as we say, Diana Luke, wow, what a woman. And you look at people like Stephanie Hurst and Steve Jordan, they've done well for themselves from where they've started.
Yeah, you mentioned Steve. I've kind of followed him, I think, a little bit. He was involved in Radio Cracker, I think, just before me, but then he was involved in quite a few what they called RSLs, restricted service licenses in Hull, which were broadcast for 1 month just to provide a bit of a different service to Humberside and Viking and Magic or whoever. In fact, it was probably before Magic. We're talking in the early 90s, a lot of them. Cod City FM, I worked with Steve on that. Universal FM, which was like a student-based station. That was good fun. It was actually based in a hotel on Beverley Road. You imagine sort of a radio station in a hotel. It's almost like a TV sitcom, isn't it? But you had a bar downstairs. I was very careful not to get too drunk. I used to help a colleague on an overnight show on that. Did a couple of shows myself. And then Soul City was a station I was on. But yeah, as I say, I followed Steve to Viking for his sports show after that.
Where was Cracker FM and Cod FM based?
Cracker FM was based at the Salvation Army Centre on Harley Street, Beverley Road. Certainly the year I was there, 1992, I think it was. A little bit, well, it was a porter cabin effectively. There was a porter cabin for the admin side of it. So I ended up reading the news quite a lot on that. But then there was another permanent building for the actual station. So I said I did my own show on that. Cod City was based somewhere in the Old Town. I'm trying to think now. It's probably down where High Street is, one of the buildings off there. It's a long time ago, Ben. A long time ago. I was involved in that many different stations that some of them blur in the mind, to be honest with you.
Yeah, brilliant. Question 3. What is your favourite part about the job? Being a radio presenter, I mean, sorry.
Right. As I say, I've probably approached this from a slightly different angle from a lot of the others because, as I say, I've never considered it as a job because I've done it as a hobby. Okay, I got paid at Viking, which was great. The other stations I didn't, which was fine as well. That was part of it. But just meeting a whole variety of people, speaking to a whole variety of people. Now, I would imagine a good half of the people that you've interviewed will know of a guy called Roy, also known as Blind Roy, who's a bit of a radio anorak, self-confessed. If you ever get to speak to him, he'll admit that himself. With him being blind, he still listens to radio a lot. He used to ring up, I think, pretty much every radio station going in Yorkshire. His phone bills must have been immense. But the weird thing is, with him speaking to everybody on different stations, he'd somehow get gossip from each of those people, and then he'd pass that gossip on to everybody else. So they'd find out after Roy. So he was telling everybody what was going on, really. Amazing guy. And even when I was on West Hull FM until fairly recently, I used to do a couple of afternoon shows, Wednesday and Thursday, I think. And Roy would ring me up every day without fail. If he didn't ring me up, I'd wonder what had gone wrong. So next time he rung me, he'd apologise why he hadn't rung me. And he'd always tell me if the music I was playing wasn't right or if I'd done something wrong with the jingles or the adverts or whatever. He kept you on your feet, put it that way. So characters like that. I also used to co-present a show for the LGBT plus community called Loud and Proud with a good mate called Dan. And we used to have some great guests on there with their own stories. A couple of police community liaison officers I'd like to mention. Sharon Hoof, who's no longer with us, she was an absolutely amazing person. I only met her 3 or 4 times, but straight away you knew she was a really empathetic person. And then when she passed away, I'd seen all the tributes to her online, and you thought, yeah, you can see exactly where they were coming from. And Danny Fleming, Scottish guy, used to come into the studio in his kilt. And I think he brought his bagpipes in as well one show, but thankfully I don't think we got him to play them. But he was another great guest on that show. So it's people like that sort of stick in the mind, really.
Yeah, we'll move on to question 4 now. Who's this Roy? Sorry, before we move on to question 4.
I think his surname's Bould, B-O-U-L-D. I hope I'm not sort of giving too much away there, but
I'd love to interview him. He sounds like a right good guy.
Right. Whether I don't know. I'll see what I can do. whether I can speak to somebody who might have his details, but I'll let you know about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. We'll move on to question 4 now. And this is the most important question of them all.
Right.
How has COVID affected your life and line of work?
Okay, so my day job, the one that pays the bills, I work in the civil service, normally in an office. So COVID hit us. It was March last year. We thought that we're going to be out of circulation, having to work from home for a couple of weeks. I've got a computer called the Surface Pro that I use at home, and after a bit of a glitch with the first couple of days, it worked fine, and then obviously time went on. I was mentoring quite a lot of new people, new to my department altogether, and also new to the job, which I thought was going to be quite a challenge doing it online rather than being face to face, but it worked fairly well. And then my job changed. I moved to a different team approximately 6-7 months ago now, so I'm still learning a new job myself, which again, I found we can work online. We're talking via Zoom today, but we use something called MS Teams, which is very similar, and it has worked fairly well, but I still miss an office environment, so I've been starting to go back into the office, and hopefully, I dare say this, where are we now? We're in middle of September, probably coming towards winter, and there seems to be all sorts of new crises coming along with various things. I try to avoid the news at the moment. It's all depressing, isn't it? But hopefully things will get back to normal. So I'm looking forward to meeting physically some of the new people that I've been working with online, really.
One thing I've noticed now with the news, they don't talk about COVID now as much.
Well, it's still there, isn't it? I'm actually a really old-fashioned. I still get a newspaper every day. I know I'm a dying breed, and the newspapers are probably dying out themselves, but they still print figures and tell you how many infections there are around the world. And you think, and they've started. Even the first COVID drama was on TV, wasn't it? Was it last week, set in Liverpool? And I thought, it's too soon. I don't want to watch this sort of thing. It's maybe 10 years time. Maybe in 10 years' time.
Over the first national lockdown, I did watch a few drama series like Line of Duty.
I've got that recorded. I'm sure I'm going to like it.
And also, I watched the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire origin story about the 2000 or 2001 fiasco called Quiz, where this about the Ingrams.
Yep, I've seen that. Yeah, really good show.
And Michael Sheen was a good Chris Tarrant.
Yeah, he's very talented, Michael Sheen. Brian Clough, he played, didn't he? If you're a football fan.
Was it Michael Sheen who was Chris Tarrant in that?
I'm having to think. I'm going to Google that now because it'll annoy me. You could be right. I think you are right, to be fair. So you can edit this bit out, can't you?
No, it all goes up.
Yes, it was Michael Sheen. Yeah, you're quite right, Ben. Michael Sheen. Yeah, spot on.
Brilliant mini series. Yeah, and also, and we'll move on to question 5 now. What advice would you give to young aspiring broadcasters who are starting out?
Oh, I've thought about this question because I was thinking, well, what advice can I give them? Because I've never had a career in radio as such, but I don't think it invalidates what I'm going to say. I'd say try and listen to a variety of people, even if it's same music you might not like. You might be, I don't know, a fan of hip hop, but listen to a classic music station, or listen to a station that plays 80s, 90s songs, or even talk stations, just to get a feel for how people come across, how they project themselves. I'm a big fan of a guy called Ian Dale who presents shows on LBC, but I listen to more of his podcasts. I think he's got a great interviewing style and he gets the best out of his interviews. So I'd say to people, listen to his podcasts or his radio shows and see what you think. Speaking of podcasts, that might be a way in, I think, for a lot of people these days, because radio's changed so much. I mean, just to give you an example, when I started, we didn't have computers, we still had record players. I didn't even have CDs when I started. I think it was just about coming in. Your jingles were played through cart machines. So that's just an example of how far radio's come. We sort of talked about how radio's become very centralized. You know, there's hardly any live shows on Viking. Obviously, likes of Westhill FM and Hull Kingston Radio doing good stuff in the city, keeping it live. So I'd certainly say those could be avenues for people to get into as well. But maybe just try doing a podcast to start with. Get used to using the microphone, used to speaking with people if you're doing it as a double header. And then try and get some sort of presence on social media just to get a bit of fame in inverted commas going for that. And then radio people may have noticed you. The more that if you set the ball rolling, then it can gather a bit of speed, or at least if you are doing that, then you can approach radio stations with examples of what you've done, whether that be commercial radio or starting a bit further down with community radio.
Yeah, as I say, I love radio, and my aim one day is either to go on to Capital and Bauer and present on Hits Radio or Greatest Hits Radio one day. That's my aim. That's my dream.
Well, that's good. It's good that you've got that ambition, that you've got something that you can sort of see as your end products ultimately.
And I want to present a chart show.
Do they still have the charts? I'm out of touch. I couldn't tell you who's number one. When I was a kid, I'd know pretty much everything in the top 40.
Did you listen to Bruno or Neil?
It would. Well, obviously, when I worked at Viking, it was Hit 40 and Pepsi. So, but before then, I probably, dare I say, I would have listened to the official top 40, the BBC one. Yeah. Tony Blackburn presented the chart show, I think, when I first started listening to it, and Tommy Vance, another name. And then, Bruno Brooks, Matt Goodyear came along, of course, after that. Some big names.
Brilliant. That's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. Joining me today, Tony. Do join me again soon for another podcast very soon. But for now, please give it up for Mr. Tony Sweeney. Thank you very much for watching and listening. This will be available on Wix.com and YouTube. Do join me again soon. Thanks very much for joining me. And that's a wrap.
Thanks, Ben.
You're welcome.